So, what is it? George Carlin, using a little alliteration here, said, it is it. We had a former president who once, I'll paraphrase, he said, it depends on what your definition of it is. Before we talk about what it is, I'd like to talk about what it isn't. So here's some IT myths that we have accumulated over the many years we've been doing business with the members of the association. IT equals computers. Yeah, they do. But it's not just computers for breakfast anymore. There's a lot of other type of equipment. And maybe you just don't know where to look. We get told we don't have IT assets. Oh, yes, you do. You can't be in companies your size with multiple buildings, campuses, international, transnational, coast-to-coast offices, and not have the type of equipment that we're discussing here. We also hear we lease our IT assets from IBM, Dell. You lease your computer, maybe your printers, monitors, desktop IT stuff, sure. Your phone systems, PBXs, yeah. But you don't lease the telecommunications equipment and networking equipment that we're discussing here, because it would make no financial sense at all. We're talking about multi-million-dollar switches, routers, so it'd be impractical and very expensive to do that. Telecom equals telephones. Yeah, in a manner of speaking. But again, companies like ours may not necessarily be interested in your telephones or your PBXs. And it doesn't matter what I'm interested in, quite frankly. What I'm trying to direct everyone toward is a bigger picture, to look at finding the type of equipment that you should be looking at. So, what is it? What do you think it is? Class? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Oh, come on. The name of the thing is communications assets.
PC, mainframe. Information.
That's what it stands for. But that's a big IT. It's not an I period, T period. It's it. Remember? It is it. Not all inclusive. Actually, we want to get that in the microscopic level here. Because the biggest it of all is communications equipment. Equipment that moves voice and data from one place to another. So, this is where you find the equipment. It is going to be rack mounted. Racks are generally 6, 7 feet tall, 19 inches wide, 23 inches wide, and they're going to have equipment in there. They're also going to be, as I'll show you in a moment, larger type of cabinets. That's where it is. And it is going to be in your data center, your network operating center, or your communications center. It's not going to be on your desktop. Okay. Why is it a high-value commodity? Simply because it has a long lifespan. Unlike desktop computers that you change out every 3 to 5 years, this equipment has a much longer lifespan. 5 years? Sure. 10? Yeah. 15, 20? 30? Does that sound like an exaggeration to anybody? 30 years for IT equipment? Yep. Yep. Nope. GTD5. This is a telecommunication switch, a digital switch that was invented in 1982 by GTE. It went into production at that time. It went out of production, was discontinued in 2002. Now, GTE sold the assets, the switch, to AT&T. AT&T formed a holding company called AG Communications, AG Communications was folded with Lucent Technologies. Lucent got acquired by Alcatel, and it's Alcatel-Lucent, and 10 minutes from now it could be something else, who knows. All right. If you happen to have a GTD5 switch, the value of it, depending on the configuration, we'll talk about configuration a little bit later, depending on the configuration, it is probably worth between $25,000 to $75,000. Now, does that sound incredible? No. We get every day RFQs from telephone companies looking for network spares on that product. They still have them in use. So, who would operate a switch that old? This is what we can say everybody. Large telcos, they start at one side of the alphabet and they go to the other side of the alphabet. Small, regional, rural telcos. There's like a couple of hundred rural telcos in Iowa alone. And they don't have a lot of budget, so they have to make their dollars stretch. So they need to keep the networks going. Cable networks. They use similar type of equipment. There's a lot of crossover in the cable world. And companies like the ones you work for. Okay, we live in a new world of communications, a digital world, a world, the VoIP world. We live in the cloud now. So, why would you be interested in still utilizing this old type of equipment? Simple. You don't replace a nationwide communication backbone every 3 to 5 years like you change out your computers. I mean, the interstate highway system started construction like in the 1950s, right? Okay. And they built out freeways. And then they found out, well, we got to build out a few more freeways. And then it gets congested. More people driving, more cars sold. And as a result, now you've got total traffic congestion. You have a way to move traffic. So what do? Of course, you tear down the old freeway and you rebuild a brand new freeway using the latest in freeway production techniques, right? No. You expand it. You add lanes. You add bypasses. You double deck it. In the future, they'll have a monorail running through it. Maybe they'll even have a supersonic transport. Who knows? So, these switches that we're talking about, they're used throughout this nationwide communications backbone. The beauty of the equipment is that it can be adapted to new technologies. It can be expanded. So like a freeway carrying more traffic, these switches can carry more traffic. Okay, so you expand what it can be done. So they're very, they can be modified. Companies, like Cisco are coming up with adaptations. The geniuses of Juniper, who knows what they're going to come up with tomorrow, next week, next year. So why not just replace your older equipment? Simple, it works. And there is a secondary market. It supports that network. And if it can't be supported, the part can't be found, what happens? There are repair depots to fix the product. And that means that telecom companies and companies like yours with large internal communication networks, you can keep those networks humming because you've got network spares for companies that have been out of business 20, 30 years. So never argue with what works. Okay, case in point. One of our customers that we deal is a large government value-added reseller. And they had a project up in, for the Canadian government, and they were tying different offices together in Montreal and Toronto. They were using these Cisco switches, not terribly expensive. And, but they did not do the Quebec. And when they asked why, they're like, yeah, later. It's not about it, later. Well, later becomes 3 years later. All right, so now they're asked to connect Quebec. And they go, well, we got a little small problem. That switch is no longer manufactured or supported. It's reached end of life. So, but Cisco has a switch that will fit right in there, same footprint, same thing, plug right in. It'll work great, not much more. And they said, no, we want the old switch. Why? Because it worked. So the bar had to go out into the secondary marketplace to find an additional switch in order to keep their customer happy.